The always intriguing, always intelligent Neal Coolong.
Yes, indeed. As always, thanks for having me. I hope you guys are well.
I am well, and it's always great when you're on the show. So the Steelers' 6 GM candidates have now completed the second round of interviews, and I think now it's time to make a decision. Omar Khan, I think, is in the clubhouse leader, but it's just me. So let's go back 1 week ago, if that, to some comments that Doug Whaley made about my broadcast partner, Jack Ham, as a player. And again, this is not personal at all. My understanding is everybody that knows Doug Whaley likes him. He's an Upper St. Clair guy, whole thing. And he said that, Jack played 210, 215. He'd be a backup special teams player today, in today's game. And Jack, of course, knowing him as well as I do, he played at 228. Neal, here's my issue. This is what eliminates him, to me, from being a serious candidate for the job when he makes a comment like that. Not because it's Jack. Zero. But that tells me he's all about measurables and about combines and things like that, and can't and doesn't have a feel for guys who know how to play and can use their mind as well as their body to play the game. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's excellent that you asked that question. I have a lot to say about this. There's a lot to unpack with the comments, and I thought something similar, but I'll admit my knee-jerk reaction was you finished or are finishing your second interview for the head guy position with a team, and you went out of your way to insult one of its greatest legends. What sense do you have of anything if that's what you're doing? This is just me. Maybe this is just more of an older school business and management background. You really have nothing to gain from doing things in some instances. If that's the case, the fact that you can't help yourself but to dunk on somebody, to throw out the big zinger, to try to generate your own hype, to me, that's not becoming of the person in charge. I really don't like that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think what he says is factually incorrect. I do think, though, that you're leaving out a lot of things. Human beings weren't even that big back then. This is all evolution. Of course, Jack Ham from 1974 would not come in and play today. I don't think anybody would. It's just not possible. And conversely, if you put Aaron Donald back into the NFL in 1974, he'd literally kill people. It's the evolution of health, nutrition, fitness, all of that. Of course, they're bigger, better, faster. That's because of Jack Ham. Why would you? Comments like that are just they're so completely asinine in my mind. That said, yes, I agree. You are essentially saying, and he even gave a range of weight that I laughed when you said it. Yeah, he didn't play at 210. What are you nuts?
He played at 228.
So you don't even know. You don't even know what you're saying. You're not prepared to have the conversation is really what I would say. There are so many things that you'd need to go over if you really wanted to get into that debate. And Jack Ham is absolutely not the guy that you should use for that. Jack Ham was evolutionary in a lot of ways for the NFL. He wasn't the big, hulking, run-stop only guy. I mean, he really was more of a look at the future at like a pure will linebacker, a Tampa 2 kind of linebacker, which is really the system that they created. He was the model of that. Yeah. Lance Briggs is a Jack Ham Jr. Lance Briggs was not a big NFL linebacker. It's how you play them. What Doug Whaley is saying, to your point, which I agree with 1,000%, you simplified it far better than I did, is we will not vary what we're doing based on the personnel of what we have. And that's the last thing I want to hear from a general manager. You cannot play in the NFL today without 50 different versions of every player that you have on your roster, on the practice squad, and on call to stay in shape in case they're needed. You have to have versatility. And clearly the Steelers have prided themselves and emphasized that point over the last 10 years. You look at the players that they've brought in, they haven't been physical marvels for the most part. They're athletic freaks, which to whatever degree you want to say Jack Ham was an athletic freak, I think the dude was above average athletically, to put it mildly. He was running with running backs. He was running with receivers. The guy could cover a lot of ground. That was very difficult to stop at a time in the NFL where things were much more vertical and inside. It's a lot harder for a linebacker to make those kinds of reads, which gets to your point as far as the mental acuity goes, which has nothing to do with your weight. Not to suggest that some tiny guy can come in because he's the smartest football player in the world, but
no.
Let's put him at 228. It's plain and simple. He's not that much smaller than your average NFL linebacker today, period. And on top of that, he's not walking around clouded in a society of smoke, drinking whiskey and water for breakfast. These type of, not to suggest Jack Ham did that, but that was what was all around everybody back then. It is far more healthy of a society today than it was. That's making people bigger, stronger, faster. Right. Athletes have far more access to training. Technology has improved in immeasurable ways compared to what it was back then. They have training camp where they actually do more than just bash each other during Oklahoma drills. Everything has evolved. It's a nonsense argument, and the fact that he said that, to me, I wouldn't want that. That's just me. I'm not going to get into his credentials or anything like that today, but to me, you can't say that. If you were in the running for a job like that, you can't say that. I wouldn't know. I don't know what else he's going to say. He doesn't even have the job, and he's mouthing off about important issues that pertain to the job he's trying to get, as well as largely sitting off base of what he's even trying to say to begin with. Yeah. So no thanks.
It's interesting because when I talk about the mind, part of the job of a linebacker, even in today's game, is you have to understand the proper depth of a drop, how you get yourself into a spot where if you're not the guy making the play, they're trying to throw the ball over you, which then makes life for the safety or the corner exponentially easier. See, he knows all that stuff, right? That's playing with your mind. That's understanding how to play the game, as opposed to being, hit the button and the athletic robot just starts sprinting all over the place. That's not. Which is
all up to the general manager, right. Too. That's the general manager's job,
right? And that's the GM's job.
You go there.
See, and that's that's the problem I've got with it. And that's why I always laugh, in a game where the ball is thrown all over the place and Jalen Ramsey is justifiably lauded as one of the top corners in today's game, and that's justifiable. He's got 15 picks in his career. Jack had 32.
Most ever for a linebacker.
Yeah, guess what? They weren't throwing as often. He still had 32.
Yeah, and they didn't throw. Keep that in mind. I mean, He picked off the ball at an insanely high rate.
Yeah.
If we're going to put it into modern statistics, the rating against Jack Ham, the interceptions to targets for Jack Ham would be astronomically high.
Exactly.
And there's a lot to say about the ball. There's a lot to say about the quarterbacks, the training, everything comes with that.
But you know what?
The rubber meets the road. When they threw at him, he took it away.
Joe Greene played at 275.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, in today's game,
the side point to all this.
In today's game, Joe Greene would be playing at 300 to 310 because he would have put himself in physical shape to play at 300 to 310. And he still would have been a great player.
Here's what to me, this is what makes the entire point asinine. We have no idea what Joe Greene would be like plus 25 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know what Joe Greene is going to say about that. I know what his peers back then would say about it.
Yep.
It's 25 pounds, though. That's a lot of weight.
Sure it is.
And to put that on the right way takes a lot. And frankly, I don't have confidence that they knew how to do that back then.
No,
I really think that
I agree with that.
the guys just ate and stopped working out.
Yeah.
That's how they put on weight. Joe Greene was
Right.
incredibly quick. He was incredibly violent with his hand
Yes, he
usage.
was.
I don't think he would have been washed out of today's NFL. I think he would have needed, if he had today's technology, probably would have been able to put on 15 pounds reasonably well, and he'd be among the smallest interior defensive linemen in the league.
Yep.
So from there, then you're probably looking at a tweener type of position for him. He's going to be a pass rusher, and he probably can do that pretty well one-on-one. But the bottom line is Joe Greene did not play today's game.
Right.
15 years ago, those guys didn't play today's game.
Right.
This game has evolved so much. It's pointless to me to try to say who could play then, who could play now. It's a good argument. I just think it boils down to a sense of toughness and competitiveness. And if you're going to go with that, I'm not betting against Jack Ham. I'm not betting against Joe Greene.
No.
If you want to go public in Pittsburgh saying that while you're on the line to be the general manager of the team, God bless you.
Well,
I don't know what else to tell you. But wow,
what's bad is
I don't want to hear that.
What's bad is he volunteered it. He wasn't asked it.
Yeah.
All right. That's what makes it work. Okay. So
complete lack of judgment. I'm not hiring a guy and paying him millions of dollars to steer a multi-tens, hundreds of millions of dollars business if that's what he's doing.
Again, my point is, if you're a GM, and on the NBA level, Calvin Booth is now in charge of what's going on in Denver because Tim Connolly took the T-Wolves job. Right?
Go Wolves.
Yeah. And to me, part of evaluating personnel, and it's not what I do for a living. I announce games, all right? But part of it has to be you've got to look at, in other words, a guy that knows how to play but runs a 5-flat 40, he's not going to be in the NFL. But when you're making decisions about guys who are like, okay, he's 4.43 and he's 4.46 and right now you got to figure out who knows how to play, right? Because that's one of the biggest problems I have with today's NFL. To me, with the biggest problem with today's NFL is there aren't that many people that know how to play, even though they're better conditioned and better athletes. The ones that know how to play, that's why they like an Aaron Donald. Sticks out like by a mile. He's a great athlete who also knows how to play.
That's why Aaron Donald, you get so many more individual accolades today. And let's take the quarterback position out completely because that's another world. But Donald is a good example. Before that, it was J.J. Watt. Why are these guys doing things that Lawrence Taylor didn't do, Joe Greene didn't do? It's because they don't have peers.
Right.
They are the best of the best because they put the work in and they're great athletes. Now that makes them peers with the old school dominant players. But my thought is, relatively speaking, if we take, let's go back over, I'm going to get the time frame here wrong. Call it 15 years. Would 15 years encapsulate the Donald and J.J. Watt era of defensive dominance?
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
Those two, put them 1 and 2 in some degree over that time period. Mm-hmm. I don't think, say, number 5 on that list is as good as number 5 was back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I think that is largely because in the craze of HWS, the height, weight, speed evaluation method, which is really what you're describing, we want traits. We'll teach you how to play the game. Athletes are they're training themselves for that. Yeah. They can get bigger. They can't get taller, but they can get faster. They can get stronger. They can make themselves functionally better athletes. And in the time they're doing that, the thought is, well, you're becoming a better football player. Not necessarily. I mean, you could, but they really are kind of two separate skills that happen with that. I think Donald is a great example of that. Donald posts a lot of his workout stuff on Instagram. He's not quite James Harrison prolific in that regard, but what you see from Donald is not the craziest, squat lift that Harrison does, which is entertaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to rip James Harrison, but Donald, you see him working with his hands. You see him working on his footwork. He's applying real technique to the game. He's not going out there and just trying to bench cars. He's getting better as a player, and you see it. You see how incredibly quick he is. It's not Mean Joe just clubbed a dude in the side of the head. He outmanned the guy more than anything else. Right. Not that he didn't have technique, but Greene had that brawn. He could just destroy you. It's not that Donald can't, but Donald also can go from that, crazed physical specimen into the fastest guy in the field in one movement.
Yeah.
And it's utterly insane because I don't think he has a peer, to be honest with you. I think he very well could retire the greatest defensive player in the history of the game. He's at that level because he's got an enormous amount of skill to go with an obvious commitment and dedication to the fitness level that he has, the conditioning that he has, and the strength and coordination that he has.
And he knows angles. This is what I'm talking about. When you get somebody who's got the mind and the instincts to go with what you're talking about, that's when you become really special. J.J. Watt was really special because he understood angles, how to get to a point, how to beat somebody off the line of scrimmage because of the route I'm taking. Or instead of one, some guys have a counter move. J.J. Watt had two primary moves and had a counter off of each. That's four.
And he could play two positions, too.
Yes.
Keep that in mind. He came from two different spots. Watt was, in my opinion, this has probably since changed, but J.J. Watt was the best defensive player I ever saw consistently. Donald is probably better than that now. Watt got hurt and that cut into his prime a bit, but between the two of them, they really don't have much of a historical peer. But where this argument is best laid out, my opinion, is the cornerback position. Now, I won't turn this into a business decision argument about Deion Sanders or anything like that, but you watch today in a highly, highly emphasized pro offense era, it is far harder to defend players today than it was. Mel Blount wouldn't have been able to do anything in today's rules. Watch
Lester Hayes and all those guys. Mike Haynes.
He doesn't have a chance. He's like an octopus. He suffocated everybody.
What do you mean I can't touch him after 5 yards?
5 yards. Bullying them, and he's going half speed, and they're giving it their all. They look like they're in the last 15 meters at the Olympics, and Blunt is just stiff-arming the guy out of the way. All right, you're tired. Time for you to go. But for me, the third on this list, and I think it's the most compelling argument to make, is Darrelle Revis. Yeah. If you watch Revis, he had, to your point about counters, he had a response to anything that you could give him on the field. Yes. He was the best defensive back all around that I saw. And yes, that's sacrilegious considering I watched Troy Polamalu in his prime.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Revis was technically a supreme player. There was nothing Darrelle Revis couldn't do well, and he did it all well. Yeah. He had to do that as a complete football player. He might not have been the pure cover guy that Deion was, but he was not far from that. And it's laughable to even try to compare the two as far as being a complete player. He defended the run. You didn't run at Revis either. You stayed away from Revis.
Right. Exactly. Well,
if he got bored, he was just going to come after your quarterback. He could blitz. Revis did everything well. Right. Just a phenomenal player. Cornerback.
Right. That's what I loved about Ed Reed as a safety. His instincts were impeccable to go with his natural athleticism. His mind was great.
What was great about Reed and that mind of his is really what stood out because he completely transformed himself as a player from the beginning of his career to the end.
Yep.
He was like three different types of players.
Yep.
And I apologize because honestly now I'm going to be thinking Revis versus Reed for the rest of the day here.
Yeah, I know.
Both of them just phenomenal football players.
But that's
and
what makes
doing
that
so at a much harder era to do it.
See, that's the standout part of it. And again, look, and I said this the other day, and I know we bring up the name. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but it's an example. Artie Burns, was and is a great athlete. He's a great athlete, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? But he doesn't know how to play. Right?
No.
And unfortunately, that's part of that. To me, that's the biggest weakness of the NFL right now. To me, is there's a high percentage of guys who are great athletes that don't know how to play. That's why when you see the great athletes that know how to play, we should be lauding them to the hills because they deserve it. They're the total package.
Out.
They're the total
Honestly,
package.
It's a combination of them having all of that, being great players who continued to get great. They didn't just wake up one day as being awesome and gave up. And then from there, it's a combination of you have to just fully accept that a large part of this is luck. You have to stay healthy, and there are plenty of just unlucky injuries that happen. But a good chunk of prevention of that is a skill as well. Keeping yourself conditioned, keeping yourself flexible, staying on top of your craft all the time. And that's a guy like Donald.
Yeah.
Somebody like Burns could have been the greatest natural athlete ever born.
Absolutely.
And he could have been extremely lucky. But the NFL is littered with that level of talent and skill because, in my opinion, it didn't work out for him right away. He had to learn on the job. And from there, it takes into account, this is something that everybody that we mentioned before has in large quantity, mental toughness.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to rip on Artie Burns either.
No, I know.
He took a beating.
And I apologize for always bringing the name up, but it's the one you think of right away. He is the ultimate combine guy.
Yeah. And he's a guy who tested well. He had great measurements. Maybe that made him a Doug Whaley All-Star. I don't know. Let's ask him about E.J. Manuel if we really want to get into it. Only quarterback taken that year. He traded up for him.
Just cruel.
I think he was in the CFL faster than he was in the NFL.
Cruel.
But Burns was a player at a marquee position who checked all the physical boxes.
Yes.
Who showed up on tape and didn't humiliate himself. And we need cornerbacks, so you draft those guys up. Again, HWS scouting, that's all you're looking for. Burns stands out in that regard. Now, let's be fair. If you take into account what a team's philosophy is when they're drafting, there usually are not anywhere close to 32 prospects who meet all of their criteria to be a first-round pick. There are like 18 of them.
15 to 20, yeah, right.
Okay. Odds are excellent. Artie Burns was not one of them.
Right.
But when you're drafting at 25, you got to take somebody. If he met a second-round bucket, it's like, look, we want to invest in this kid. We like his character. We feel we can work him through generally kind of a lack of experience. He didn't have great film, and he didn't have a lot of film. Mm-hmm. He was a project. Yep. And oftentimes that's what you draft when you're drafting 25, a high-ceiling guy. And if he works out, great. You're super excited about it. It's to get a guy like that at 25, you're very excited. But they are not typically going to be, well, he just fell through everybody else. Like, nobody had a first-round grade on him. But when there are only 18 guys, call it 20, and there are 32 picks, not every team can trade out of the first round. They can't just boycott the first round. Somebody's got to draft somebody. So a guy like Burns is the prospect that they want to try to develop, and you're not going to hit on those every single time. And obviously it didn't work out, despite the fact, and we've talked about this, Artie Burns is still in the NFL.
Yes, he is.
Why? Because he's big and he's athletic.
Yes.
They're going to keep trying to get him work. Worst case, he can play special teams, but every team needs 5, if not 6 cornerbacks nowadays with how deep they go into the secondary.
That's right.
He's going to stay in the league.
Yep.
He's going to continue to get paid. We'll always talk about him as the guy who missed, but hey, he's laughing all the way to the bank. He had himself a pretty nice career, all things considered. He got paid.
And he's had to help out his family. I mean, which he's done. He's a good man. I mean, he's he's had to help out his family, and he's done well with that. So, hey.
You know what? He tried. I mean, I know that sounds really preschoolish, and I'm not passing out participation trophies. He has not been a good NFL player. But the fact is, he showed up. He put the work in. It didn't work out. You can't insult the guy. You can't disrespect the guy. It doesn't work out for everybody.
No.
You know, it's a really hard league. That's, in my opinion, that's the toughest all-around position to play and maintain success.
Yep.
You get a lot more of them in the league who just simply aren't good enough because you have to have a lot more of them. So a lot of these guys are gambles, guys that you have to take because you need them on the field. I
know this went a little bit longer, but I just thought it was a fascinating topic, and as usual, you hit it out of the park. So appreciate you very much, Neal. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.